Hi there, it's John Pushkar, and I'm here today with another episode to try to keep you safe in the world of fuels and combustion systems. July 5th, 2019, do you know where you were? I was thinking, gee, I'm going to be another year older tomorrow. But at the University of Nevada, Reno, at 12:44 in the afternoon, there was a horrible explosion at their dormitory facility. 15 minutes later, there was another horrible explosion. Fortunately, there were no fatalities. There were 400 people in the dormitory facility when the explosion occurred. There were only 8 injuries. It's by the grace of God, no one got killed in this incident. I'm going to review this incident with you today. I'm going to talk about a similar incident that I investigated a number of years ago in an auto plant. I'm going to talk to you about some steps you can take to make your facility safer from this kind of an incident. And I'm going to give you one particular thing you can run out and do right now that won't cost you anything, that I guarantee will enhance the level of safety at your facility.
Over the last 40 years, I've developed and led fuels and combustion equipment safety programs for the largest manufacturers in the world. Today, I'm bringing you knowledge, insights, and best practices about fired equipment and natural gas safety. Over the next few minutes, you'll get the kind of practical, real-life explanations that I've become known for.
So fortunately, I'm able to communicate a lot of details about this particular incident, not because I was there, but because the state of Nevada has enabled public information to be available on their website. And I'm going to give you a link to all of this information. It includes reports, information from people who were at the scene, and even an over hour-long interview with the technician who was actually attempting to work on this particular boiler when the incident occurred. So let's go back in time and let's talk about exactly what's happened here, because it's important to give you the right context and all of the information. There was a call by someone who operated the building at the facility to report that the boiler was not working correctly. There happened to be 2 boilers in this boiler room. A technician showed up, diagnosed the situation, ordered a part, came back, and attempted to install this part, which in the report is discussed as a servo motor. What this actually is it's an actuator, and I'm going to show you a schematic here of a fuel train to show you actually where this is. But this is an actuator for a fuel valve, call it the control valve. What this is the firing rate valve. It's actually the gas pedal, if you will, for this particular boiler. It makes the flame bigger or smaller depending on the steam pressure that's required at the time. In the interview of the boiler tech, he reports that he tried several starts and he had a flue gas analyzer in the stack, and the stack readings were not correct. He knew something was wrong. On one particular attempt, after he shut the boiler off, the boiler went into what's called a post-purge, where there's just air flushed through the firebox for some predetermined amount of time, usually 25 to 30 seconds. It was during this post-purge period that he reported a rumbling sound and then the explosion. Unfortunately, when this boiler exploded, the firebox came apart and it physically broke the piping of the fuel train. It broke the fuel train piping ahead of or in front of the automatic shutoff valves. So even though they shut, they had no impact on the 3-inch gas line that was ruptured. Natural gas under pressure from this 3-inch gas line filled the boiler room, went up an elevator shaft even. About 16 minutes later, a flammable mixture found an ignition source and created the second explosion, which ripped apart the building with tremendous force. The pictures are horrible. It's just, again, incredible that there were only 8 injuries, because this could have been much different. I investigated the same kind of incident a number of years ago at an auto plant outside of Toledo, Ohio. I'm going to show you some pictures from that particular incident, one in particular which indicates what I believe might have also happened here. In that particular incident, it was also a light-off attempt. In that particular incident, an explosion occurred. It broke the fuel train for the boiler that the technician was working on. It also broke that fuel line ahead of any automatic shutoff valves. But in that particular case, for some reason, the technician remained in the room, found a shutoff valve, a manual shutoff valve, and closed it. Otherwise, that also would have had quite a different ending. We took an abrasive wheel cutoff saw and cut the fuel train apart right ahead of this fuel control valve. And here's what we found. As you can see, that butterfly valve is wide open. So when boilers start up, or when most kinds of fired equipment start up, there's a pre-purge to remove any potential flammable gases from the firebox. Then a pilot light is lit. The pilot is meant to light the larger main burner, but only to light it at some predetermined low fire that has deemed to be a safe light-off position for the gas valve. If that main gas valve for some reason malfunctions or is not commissioned correctly or set up correctly, if it happens to end up full wide open like this particular one was, the mixture comes out and it's not ignitable at the pilot. It accumulates in the boiler. Upon multiple light-off attempts, you can understand it's too rich to light off because there's lots of fuel, not enough air. But eventually, most likely during one of the post-purge periods when there's just fresh air and no fuel, you dilute all of that accumulated mixture enough so that it does become flammable. It finds an ignition source. It could be a spark igniter the next time you try to ignite, could be a hot piece of refractory, could be many things, and then the explosion occurs. So now that you understand what likely happened, how it happened, so what can we do about this at your facility to make your facility safer? Well, let's talk first from the perspective of process safety. And process safety advocates would say you need to look at hazards and you need to decrease hazards. So one of the hazards is just the natural gas by virtue of its just existence and presence there. You can't do anything about the use of natural gas. You need natural gas, obviously, to combust in the boiler. But there is something you can think about doing regarding how much can flow in the case of a pipe break. And that's related to a gentleman named Daniel Bernoulli, who in 1738 gave us all a formula that says that the amount of flow through an orifice or a pipe is proportional to the square of the pressure drop. So if you can somehow reduce the amount of pressure that you're sending around the boiler room or in your facility so that it's not much more than you actually really need to fire correctly, you will have reduced the inherent hazard of the natural gas being there. Maybe you rethink the sizes of pipes, where regulators are. The second thing you should think about doing is, where can the gas be shut off in case there's an incident? Would you believe me if I told you that in this particular incident, there was a gas valve but no handle on it? Would you further believe me if I told you that the gas valve was behind a locked, fenced-in area? So one of the other things you could do is make sure that there are shutoff valves readily available, that they have handles on them, that they are accessible. So NFPA 54, the National Fuel Gas Code, which I'm a member of, I'm going to show you a little excerpt from it. It says that you're supposed to have gas shutoff valves outside of buildings. I'm sure you'd agree this can certainly help. Another thing you can pay attention to is a boiler code that's called ASME CSD1. That's Controls and Safety Devices for Automatically Fired Boilers. It's been adopted into law in more than half the states in the US. It only really applies to boilers that are 12,500,000 BTUs an hour input and less. This code mandates that you have an e-stop. There's some means of shutting off the boiler, the power to the boiler, near an exit from the boiler room facility. Great idea. Whether or not you're a CSD1 state or a CSD1 sized facility, you might want to think about this. But what's the number one thing that I think you need to do right away? Won't even cost you any money. And I guarantee it'll move the needle on safety at your facility. You need to have a process and a protocol in place when it comes to certain hazardous types of projects or work that might be going on in your facility. You might already have a hot work process in place, but I'd like you to think about drawing a parallel to what one of our clients, U.S. Steel, was doing a number of years ago, and I believe they still do. They have in place a program for categories of hazardous jobs that they do. It includes things like crane lifts, high voltage switchgear, gas piping work. Whether you're a steel facility or possibly not a manufacturing facility at all, let's say that you're a university somewhere else with a dormitory, what would be so bad about having a process in place where if there's to be work done on boiler facilities or on gas lines anywhere near kids or people, that you have such a process? And here's some things that are in a process like that. One is that you have a hazardous job meeting and you discuss things that can go wrong. In this particular case, do you think it would have helped if somebody would have identified that, we ought to have a person on a radio where the gas valve shutoff is, so that in case something happens, it's just a matter of seconds we can get gas shut off? What about, do you think it would have helped to have reviewed exactly what work was going to be done and that maybe that should be scheduled at a time when the building's unoccupied? What about things like interviewing the technician who's going to do the work? What are that person's certifications and credentials? What about a discussion about who's going to be in the room? A lot of these kinds of things, they're not spectator sports. And you really want to make sure there's no one around. And you really want to make sure that there aren't people who don't need to be there in the immediate vicinity. And oh yeah, last but not least, regarding this plan, make sure that you have discussions with your local fire department. Make sure their planning documents for your facility are up to date and that they do have an accurate understanding of where gas shutoff valves are. I really hope that if you got nothing else out of this episode, that moving forward you'll change the way you do business and you'll adopt some type of hazardous project review policy. Because remember, at the end of the day, the life that you save, it just might be yours. Hi, it's John Pushkar. I hope you found this episode useful. If you'd like to know about more ways that I can help, you can check out my website at www.prescientts.com. There you'll find information about the Prescient Technical Services online school, my book, Fuels and Combustion System Safety, What You Don't Know Can Kill You, and also about some of the consulting projects that I've been providing to clients for the past 40 years. Things like implementing inspection and testing programs on a corporate enterprise-wide level, things like reviewing and commenting on capital equipment purchases that involve combustion equipment, and even being a legal expert if things go really wrong. Once again, thank you for attending, and remember, be safe out there. The life you save, it just might be yours.